Welcome back to the Profit Builder Unscripted. In today's episode, we're talking about how do you start to have a better relationship with your numbers, and more importantly, how do you be willing to be a beginner and a learner in order to get more clarity and confidence so that you can take more powerful actions to get to where you want to go. All right, let's jump in. I run a peer group called the Contractors Collective, and last month we had our 2-day event together. And one of the things that I asked the members to bring was their financial results for the last couple of years, so last 2 years, and then through the previous month. And when I started asking people about what they noticed about the numbers or how did they feel about them, the resounding feedback I got was that they were not particularly comfortable looking at their numbers, or they didn't have, I asked about budgeting, and they didn't really have a budget or a plan. And a lot of kind of the answer I got was, well, I'm not sure how to do that, or I don't know how to do that, or I don't know what to look at in my financial reports. And I took a deep breath and I thought, what is the most useful thing that I can say to people about this? Because for me, I see how it's such a critical and important part of running your business is having a relationship with your results. Even this morning, talking to a client about what is the most important and useful part of our work together for you. And it's somebody that I've worked with for quite a long time. And he said, it's looking at the numbers. It's being able to see where I've been, where I am, and where I'm headed. He said, it moves me from a place of being so in angst where I'm headed. And as soon as I look at the numbers and we sit down and we talk about them, he goes, I always have more peace of mind. Even if I don't like what the numbers say, he said, at least I know where I stand and I know what I need to do. Like it gives me an idea of where the gap is and how much I have to sell additionally, or what do I have to do to improve my gross profit margin or cut down my overhead expenses or whatever. He said, but it just like being able to see the numbers gives me more peace of mind. And I got to thinking, what is it's not, like he didn't just learn one day how to look at numbers and then it all of a sudden just became clear to him. He said, where I started out 15 years ago, he goes, I just never even looked at them. I never knew to even pay attention to them, or I was intimidated by them. And he said, it's just been a practice of learning. And it got me thinking about a story for myself about this whole thing about when are we willing to be a beginner and a learner? And are we willing to make mistakes? Because that's the thing. A lot of times our greatest learning comes from our greatest mistakes, or to be willing to put in the effort to keep learning when we make mistakes or when we don't know, or to be able to move through that discomfort of not knowing. And I think a lot of times people get intimidated by numbers when the truth is it's just a practice. So I, about 7 years ago, my husband, his family owns a farm where they grow wheat. And I knew it was my father-in-law's last year for harvesting wheat, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna get some of the wheat, and I think I'm gonna do starter bread. So you make it with, instead of using yeast to make bread, you do starter bread. You make it out of that. So I ground up the wheat. It was a very industrious project, but I ground up the wheat and so on. And I was like, I wanted to preserve that history. I had never actually, I think I maybe made bread once up until that point. And starter bread is particularly time consuming and challenging to make. But I was committed and I started looking up all these recipes on the internet. I started buying books and I took classes. And I got to tell you, I made more horrible loaves of bread for years before I learned how to make bread. But I kept, like, what I would keep at it. I would keep making bread, I would like it would be really dense, or it wouldn't rise, or it didn't have holes, or it had too many holes, or it exploded in my oven, or like you name it, bread making mistakes, I made them all. And here's the thing though, is that every time I made a mistake, I was like, oh, like, I don't understand that. What made that happen? Like, why did that happen? And then I would do a little bit more research and I would find out, oh, you did this, you had too much water, you didn't have enough water, you didn't let it rise long enough, whatever it was, I needed it too long or what have you. But I kept, as I made mistakes and as I didn't understand what caused that mistake to happen, I started to learn more and more. It wasn't until about a year and a half ago, so 5.5 years in of making bread, it wasn't until then that I looked up one day and I turned to my husband, Tim, and I said, oh, I'm a good bread baker. I can make a decent loaf of bread. It was a long journey. Now, the thing that, why am I sharing this story with you is because we don't wake up one day being an expert in something. People say to me, like, how do you know so much about numbers and finance? I'm like, hey, I have made every possible mistake when it comes to bookkeeping and accounting that you could ever make. In my early career, I've made horrible mistakes. The thing was that I learned from them, and not like you want to make mistakes in your financial data, but the point is like we all have to start at some point being a beginner and being a learner. And the more you are willing, like this whole thing about numbers, if you're somebody who's intimidated by your numbers, if you don't know your numbers, if you don't like look at your financial reports because you're not sure what they say, first of all, I'm going to tell you, I'm going to give you a couple links below for videos that will explain to you how to read your numbers. And it will also give you, there's a sheet that I'm going to include that includes how to look at like what benchmarks, how do you make meaning of the numbers? So I'm going to give you links below to help you do that. If you're somebody who doesn't know how to or doesn't feel comfortable with looking at your profit and loss or your balance sheet. But I've seen that, when you're willing to do this in your business, when you're willing to learn, when you're willing to invest as Aaron did in learning and in looking and reviewing and looking and reviewing, the more you do that, you build muscle memory, right? I kept making bread and I kept learning. Every time I made bread, I learned more and more until it became second nature. I don't look at a recipe anymore. I had to look at every detail of a recipe for a long, long time. So you might have to look at that sheet for a really long time that says, look at this, notice that. You might listen to that video dozens of times in order to help you get more comfortable with it. But I'm telling you, having a relationship with your numbers can be a game changer in being able to build a more profitable business. Because when you can see the numbers and you can start to interpret them, now you can start to go, and you're going to find out, by the way, there's just a handful of really key things that you're looking at on those reports that when you can start to like narrow down, all right, what do I need to improve on? A lot of times we pay attention to the revenue number, but is it gross profit margin? And then I talk about like some of the ways to make a difference in that and how to improve that. And it's kind of the whole, what's a good set of numbers to have for your business depends on you, depends on your business, but there are some industry standards. So look at the benchmark information that I share with you. But anyway, the point is not to drive you to go watch videos, although I encourage you to watch them and to look at this document I'm sharing with you below. But more importantly, that be willing to be a learner, be willing to be a beginner, be okay with not knowing, be okay with I'm not sure and asking questions, be okay with spending the time, investing the time, because the more time you spend with it, the more comfortable you will get with it. Just like Aaron, like the more he over the years has looked at his numbers month in and month out. And I can say this is true for everybody that I work with. The more you look at your numbers, the more comfortable you get with them, the more confidence you will build. And the more confidence, first of all, it gives you that clarity. And the more clarity you have, the more confidence you have. And the more confidence you have, the more powerful actions that you can take. And and it's the way that you will start to be able to build a more profitable and successful contracting business. All right, I hope this has been helpful to you. And feel free to reach out if you have questions. Make sure to download the stuff below. Make sure to follow or subscribe. If you have enjoyed or appreciated this content, also feel free to share it. And if you have not checked out my book, The Profit Bleed: How Managing Margin Can Save Your Contracting Business, that is really a great resource to help you, once you start looking at your numbers, actually identify where are some places that you can start to make improvements in your numbers to increase your profitability. All right. Thank you for being here today, and I look forward to seeing you next time on the Profit Builder Unscripted.